right, Shali, thank you. The debate over same-sex marriage goes before the U.S. Supreme Court today. In fact, the justices will hear arguments about Proposition 8. Today we are joined this morning by Democratic San Diego Congressman Scott Peters, Charles Lamandry from the Freedom of Conscience Defense Fund, who supports Prop 8, and Dr. Lori Hensick from the American Military Partner Association. Thank you all for being here. Representing both sides here. So we wanted to get your thoughts. We'll start with you, Congressman. Your thoughts on what will happen today?
Well, what the court's looking at is whether it's legitimate for government to draw a line between one group of people who can get married and another group of people who can get married. And when you deal with something that's a fundamental right like marriage, they're going to make the government answer the question very specifically with a compelling reason. And that's what they'll be talking about today, whether there's a real reason to make that distinction. You
just got elected, of course. Your stance on gay marriage is what?
I'm for marriage equality. Yeah.
Okay, so you're for gay marriage?
Yes.
Okay, Charles, your thoughts on what is happening today with the U.S. Supreme Court?
They're going to be looking at the Equal Protection Clause of the United States Constitution in order to determine whether same-sex couples have the same right to marry as opposite-sex couples. And we anticipate what the court is likely to do, and I'm a proponent of Proposition 8 in traditional marriage, is realize there is a distinction, that the two groups are not similarly situated because of the procreative aspects of marriage and because of the importance of having kids in terms of procreation, in terms of child rearing, in terms of education and protection of children. It makes a distinction.
Lori, let's bring you in. Obviously, I'm sure you disagree with Charles. I wanted to see, share your thoughts, and what is it that Charles said in his defense of this that you're against? Because you're for gay marriage.
Right.
So explain your philosophies on this.
I'm for marriage equality because gay marriage is the same as straight marriage. It's the same. Marriage is marriage and love is love. I do not believe that marriage, the foundation of marriage is tied to an ability to have children, because certainly there are couples that are married that do not have children. Either they're not able to biologically, or they just choose not to. So I disagree with the stance that the reason why this should be a fundamental right should not be granted to a certain proportion of our population is based on procreative abilities.
I want your thoughts on what the U.S. Supreme Court, what you think will come out of this. Will this bring sweeping changes? Will this only affect Proposition 8 in California? What do you expect to come out of the Supreme Court?
You know, it's difficult to say because the Supreme Court can go any infinite number of ways. And so there are many different permutations about what can happen. Of course, what I would like to see happen is both DOMA and Prop 8 fall 100%, so that there is full equality. But today, with Prop 8, they're going to be discussing equal protection under the law, as has been said by Congressman Peters. And they're also going to be really addressing whether or not it is right to grant rights to a group of people and then take them away. And so that's a big part of the Prop 8 case as well today.
Charles, I want to bring you in. Prop 8 passed with 52% of the vote here in California. That's been a big argument with this. The voters passed Prop 8.
Yes.
Can we go against what the voters say? What do you say?
It is a states' right issue, and it's not just California. Some 40 states have laws protecting traditional marriage between a man and a woman, the way it's always been from the beginning of time. And in California, we have a constitutional amendment, which they have in 30 other states as well. So we think it's unlikely the United States Supreme Court is going to take away the right to vote of the people of California and other states on this fundamental issue of public policy.
What's going to happen? We know that we're going to get the result of this in June, Scott. So,
well, you know, I may disagree a little bit with Charles. Remember that the Constitution is a limit on what government can do. You know, they can't restrict our speech rights. They can't restrict our right to practice our religion. They can't establish a religion. Government may find in the context of Prop 8, which is a California amendment, or DOMA, the Defense of Marriage Act, which is the federal law, that those are just inappropriate restrictions on people's ability to marry, which is a fundamental right. If they find that as a right, I think it would be hard for them to sustain either of those laws, and we expect that both of them would be thrown out come June.
The majority of Americans at this point, depending on the different polls and different reactions, but it seems the majority of Americans support gay marriage at this point. How do you argue against that? Because you're arguing, well, Prop 8 was passed with 52%, that's what the voters wanted, but yet you do another poll and say most Americans support gay marriage. How do you argue that point, Charles?
The only poll that matters is what happens when people turn out to vote. We have traditional marriage in 40 states. We have constitutional amendments in 31 states. The poll said we were going to lose Proposition 8 right up to the very night of the election. The fact is we always underpoll on this issue. A lot of times it's because of the way the pollsters ask the question. They'll say, do you want to ban gay marriage? People don't want to ban anything. But if they do you want to keep marriage as between a man and a woman, people say, oh yeah, we want to do that. So it's how you ask the question. And quite frankly, people get a little intimidated. They don't want to be called bigots. So they don't even want to tell pollsters how they feel. But when they get in the voting booth, people tend to vote their conscience and they do what they know is right.
The poll doesn't matter. I agree with Charles. Polls don't matter. But the question is, if the state violates the federal constitution, if the state tries to take away the rights that someone has because of marriage is a fundamental right, and that violates the United States Constitution, then those votes don't matter either. The Constitution protects the minority, even against actions by the voters.
It's hard to have a discussion between both sides here when they look at each other face to face. Lori, can you tell Charles why you feel this is a civil rights issue for you? And explain, because it's a matter of looking at each other face to face and not screaming on the streets. Explain what, because you feel this is a civil rights issue.
Right.
You should have the right to be married just like anybody else.
Absolutely.
Explain to Charles.
So there's so many parts to this that I don't even know where to begin. But the biggest part is to reiterate what Congressman Peters had said, what Kamala Harris, our Attorney General in California, had said, and what numerous people have said is that marriage is a fundamental right. And you can talk about polls, and I do agree with you that sometimes polls can be misleading depending on how that they are implemented. But it doesn't matter to a certain extent what the polls say. What matters is what the Constitution says, and that all individuals are created equal. I certainly pay my taxes, and I deserve all rights that every other American deserves by being an American citizen. And lastly, as a representative of the American Military Partner Association, and personally, as my partner serves this country, and is sacrificing for other people to have the right to even have this discussion here, for you to be able to express your opinions as such, for her to not come back and her life and her value not to be respected in the same way that she's respecting yours by protecting it is really hard to swallow for us as a nation and our national security.
Charles?
I've got 3 cousins and a nephew who are gay. I love them and want nothing but the best for them. Of course, I want them to be happy. We're talking about here, though, preserving the most fundamental institution of society. The reason why marriage is indeed recognized by the court decisions as a fundamental right, as articulated by every court that's ever said that, is because marriage is the institution by which society is able to continue. It brings the 2 halves of humanity with a conjugal relationship, which only men and women could have by nature, that's capable of producing children. And the reason why government is in the marriage business is because children are the weakest, most vulnerable members of our society, and they need that protection. Marriage is not just about adult emotional attachments, and although we want everyone to be happy, and although that's an important part of it, that's not the only part of it, and probably, quite frankly, isn't the most important part from the government's perspective, because there's lots of good adult relationships that we want to be able to encourage. But it's the fact that children are being brought into the world, and quite frankly, even though 2 women can make wonderful parents, as can 2 men, 2 women can't replace a father, and 2 men can't replace a mother, and kids have a right to have a mother and father whenever possible.
Here's what I know. You're both very well spoken in both of your sides. This debate can go on for hours and hours. Sure. We know that with everybody changing their minds.
We weren't yelling and screaming.
And that's what I appreciate from both of you. You weren't yelling and screaming at each other. Congressman, thank you. Charles, Lori, thank you both very much.
Thank you, Ro.
We're going to be hearing a